Here there, Rear Admiral Chris Sutherland, aka the Alcoholic Admiral, coming to you with episode 9. Episode 9 covers my second major depression. I've talked about my addiction, I guess my first serious bout of depression, which, involved self-harm and suicidal ideation. And I was so grateful for the intervention of my friends, my family, my good best friend in getting me the help that I needed. This second major depression occurred while I was a captain Navy, so a very senior officer attending the National Security Program. It is a year-long course offered to officers who have been identified as having the potential to achieve the rank of general or admiral. A number of international military senior leaders attend, as well as senior government civilian leaders. It is equivalent of the U.S. War College program. At this time, I had approximately 7 years in recovery from addiction when my marriage fell apart. I learned in early recovery that before one enters into a serious relationship, get a plant. See if that plant lasts for about a year. And if that happens, you're successful there, consider getting a pet. If you're able to take care of a pet and that pet thrives, then and only then, after about another year, maybe consider getting in a relationship with another human being. But I knew better. The second I got sober, I think I shared I broke up with this wonderful person who had been with me through my addiction and supported me. And I reunited with my university sweetheart who I'd been dating off and on for, over a decade by that time. And entered into, kind of marriage with this, wonderful individual. But while I had put the plug in the jug, I was physically sober, from my addiction. I was not emotionally sober. I was not capable of feeling feelings and dealing with them in a healthy way. I had a lot more work to do on being able to be with another person, to be part of their life in an intimate relationship. So the marriage broke down and I fell into another depression while on this senior leaders course, this master's level course. It was scary as hell. I went from fully functioning, writing papers, participating in syndicate discussions, engaged with these top performers from the military and civilian leadership cohorts, to barely being able to get out of bed. The best way I can describe it is that a wave of sadness and insecurity overwhelmed me. It just rolled right over me. My mind turned against me is the best way I can describe it. I believed every negative thought about myself, every insecurity, every form of self-loathing, that I was a fraud, that I was stupid, unintelligent, that I didn't deserve to achieve the rank I was at, let alone any future promotions, that I wasn't worthy of happiness or good things in my life. Just as scary at this time was that I was sober. I was 7 years into recovery from addiction, 7 years since my last drink, and I had to feel all of these feelings without numbing with booze. And that was scary as hell. Fortunately, in recovery from my addiction and I guess my first bout of depression, even though, as I shared, I really, I still drank my way through that first depression, I knew what to do. I knew that first I had to admit that I had a problem. Second, I knew that I had to reach out for help. And once again, I was overwhelmed by the support of the staff at the National Security Program, the academic staff, the military staff, the medical folks, my family, and my colleagues on the course. So this course, you're literally on a campus, and most of us were staying in almost like a residence type setting. So we're all staying in the same building over the course of this year. I was fortunate that I was able to get in treatment. The course is offered in Toronto. That's where our big staff college is, military staff college. So I was able to get into the Center for Addictions and Mental Health in Toronto, CAMH. I underwent cognitive behavioral therapy with a psychologist. I started taking medication for depression, 20 milligrams of citalopram, and I take that to this very day. I also engaged or tried to engage in healthy eating, in exercise, but most importantly, I think, was that I engaged in socialization, and I want to focus on this point. I was so full of self-hate and self-loathing at this time, brought on by the depression, the breakdown of this marriage. I was on that course, as I said, with the highest performers in the military, international, Canadian, government. But on this course were 3 brigade commanders, veterans of the war in Afghanistan. And I thought they would be my harshest critics because, I was going through a depression for a breakdown in a marriage. These individuals had been in combat. They had lost soldiers in combat. They were dealing with their own, post-traumatic stress, mental health challenges. And I thought they would be my harshest critics because, who is this guy, who can't even handle the breakdown of a marriage and get on with his life? But, nothing could have been further from the truth. These individuals were my biggest supporters. They understood what mental illness was, and what's required to achieve mental health again. And the jerks wouldn't let me isolate. When it comes to my addiction and my mental illness, in my case, remember, I can only speak for myself. I'm not an expert. I believe isolation to be a killer. My depression drove me to isolate due to the shame and guilt that I felt. One of my wingers, one of these Army brigade commanders, this veteran of Afghanistan in particular, recognized that I was struggling, and he gently, forced me to get out and socialize. He forced me to eat with the group in that social setting. He forced me to get out of my room, which is the only place I wanted to be, under the covers, isolating. And this was huge key to my recovery. I can't stress enough that I think isolation is a killer when it comes to mental illness and addiction, because in my case, it just, every fiber of my being just wanted to isolate, to be alone in my shame, in my guilt, in my fear, in my self-hatred. And my good friends and the rest of my course mates, they were amazing. They understood I was struggling. They supported me. They kind of backstopped me on the academic stuff. But they really, really were there for me. But one individual in particular, and again, a veteran of Afghanistan, a brigade commander who lost soldiers in combat, was my biggest supporter, my biggest fan. And the bugger wouldn't let me isolate. The jerk wouldn't let me isolate. And he was a big part of my recovery, as were my family, my friends, the medical staff. Gradually, I came out of the depression, the fog, the isolation, and I worked my way back to health. And I'm so grateful to those who supported me. I was able to counter the negative thoughts with cognitive behavioral therapy, the negative self-talk, and get perspective and see myself through others' eyes in a more positive way. But once again, from my experience, what helped me to return to health was, number 1, recognizing I had a problem. Number 2, seeking the support of friends, family, colleagues, particularly when it comes to isolation. Reaching out for help I spoke about. And number 4 is following the recommended medical recovery program. These things are vital. I'll kind of put the list on the screen. For my recovery, again, I'm not an expert, but if you are struggling with depression, and if, I really hope that you can find a way to seek help, because I know I would not be here if I had not sought help for my addiction, for my depression, and I can tell you that life is so much better in recovery. I can't believe I was there. I can't believe I had all those negative thoughts. And life is so amazing, in sobriety, in recovery, and when I'm in a state of mental health. And again, I keep building up more tools in the toolbox. I focus more on my 12-step program that I'd kind of let fall by the wayside. I leveraged everything that I knew that I needed to do to get myself back to a place of health. but that would not have been possible without the support of friends, family, colleagues, and the intervention of those Army brigade commanders, those veterans, and the larger group. I was fortunate that I guess I was in this kind of school environment and a residence where we all cohabitated, and we were able to watch each other's backs. And I was overwhelmed once again by the amazing people I got to serve with on this year-long course. And I graduated and I came out of it, and I was able to move forward and become a base commander and eventually get promoted to be an admiral and love life. I'm still really good friends with my ex-wife. She's still a big part of my life. My daughter, and I'm very fortunate that my current wife understands, childhood divorce and the importance of having those family connections. So, I couldn't be more blessed with the way things turned out in this case. So once again, if you're struggling with addiction, with mental illness, please reach out for help. Seek the help of experts. I know I've got a lot of privilege in that I have these resources available to me. That's not always possible, but I hope that you'll be able to find a way. So thank you for letting me share. Thank you for listening. Be kind. Stay hydrated, make good choices, and I think we'll hold off on the 80s video for this one. Maybe we'll do it during the next one. So Chris Sutherland, Alcoholic Admiral, signing off. Thank you. Cheers.